I'm Ingrid. I'm 34. And the last time my whole family laughed at me, my 8-year-old son ended the party. It was my sister Nia's baby shower. Pink balloons, a 3-tier cake, 30 guests in coordinated outfits. Nia looked straight at me from across the gift table and said the line she'd been rehearsing all week. My mother nodded like she'd been waiting for it. Guests clapped. Then Devin, my quiet kid, the one they'd wedged into a folding chair by the hallway, stood up and asked one question. The room went so silent, I could hear ice shifting in the punch bowl. But what happened at that shower started 6 weeks earlier in a stack of numbers that didn't add up. Welcome back to calm drama stories, where quiet women set loud boundaries and the truth always finds its moment. If a family ever judged you while hiding the real mess behind their own front door, you'll feel this one. Drop a comment, tell me where you're listening from, and be sure to subscribe. 6 years ago, my husband left a sticky note on the kitchen counter. Not a letter, not a conversation, just 4 words. I can't do this. And his ring sitting next to the toaster. Devin was too. He kept walking to the front door for a week after, pressing his face against the glass. And I kept pulling him back and pretending the sound I made was a laugh. I didn't have a career then. I had half a degree in accounting and a $340 checking balance. So I finished the degree at night. I passed the CPA exam with Devin sleeping on a folded blanket under my desk because I couldn't afford a sitter past 9. By 29, I'd started my own forensic accounting practice. Just me, a laptop, and a rented office above a dry cleaner that smelled like chemical lavender. By 34, I had 11 steady clients, a mortgage I was 3 years ahead on, and a son who could name every dinosaur that ever lived. None of that mattered to my family. To my mother, Carol, I was still the daughter who couldn't keep a man. To my sister, Nia, I was a cautionary tale, proof that she'd made the smarter choice. They never asked about my work. Never asked how Devin was doing in school. Every Thanksgiving, every birthday, every phone call circled back to the same arithmetic. Nia had a husband. Ingrid did not. And the math was that simple. I let them do it. Year after year, I absorbed it and drove home and told myself it didn't matter. It mattered. My family had a word for me. It wasn't successful. My mother called every Sunday at 4. She never asked how it was. The call always started with Nia. Nia's new kitchen tile, Nia's promotion at the dental office, Nia's husband, Mike, and the trip they took to Hilton Head. If I mentioned Devin made honor roll, Mom would say, "That's nice," and pivot back to the real headline. "Your sister's doing so well, Ingrid. She figured it out like life was a combination lock, and I'd been spinning the dial wrong for a decade." The subtext was never subtle. Nia married at 25. Nia had a house with Atwacar garage. Nia did everything in the right order, and I was the rough draft she'd learned from. Mom said it best one Easter when I brought Devin over and he accidentally knocked a glass off the table. She looked at me while she cleaned it up and sighed. "Your sister made smarter choices, Ingrid. That's all. Like it was weather, like it was just the way temperatures worked." I learned to hold my face very still when she said things like that. Devin learned, too. He'd go quiet and press into my side, and I'd feel his small fist grip my sleeve. He was 8, and he already knew when a room had turned against us. I should have said something years ago. I should have drawn a line in the tile grout of my mother's kitchen and told her that my son could hear every word. But I didn't. I carried it all. Their disappointment, their arithmetic, their version of me, because carrying things was what I did. Carrying was my weakness. I was very, very good at it. Nia was 7 months pregnant when Mom called to announce the shower. Not invite me. Announce. "We're having it at the house the 2nd Saturday in June. I'll need you here by 8 to set up the chairs." I held the phone away from my ear and stared at Devin, who was building a Lego bridge on the carpet. "So I'm setting up," I said. "Well, someone has to. Nia can't lift things." There was no mention of a +1, no mention of Devin. When I asked if I should bring him, Mom paused for 3 full seconds, I suppose. Keep him out of the way. My kid, her grandson. I said, "Okay, because that's what I did." I said, "Okay." And then I sat with the word afterward like it was a rock I'd swallowed. Mike was the reason Nia's life looked the way it did. He was 36, broad-shouldered, worked in regional sales for a building supply company. He brought Mom flowers on her birthday. He grilled steaks at every cookout and called her Mom C with a wink. The whole family treated him like a trophy Nia had earned for doing life correctly. Nobody questioned the business trips. Mike traveled every other weekend. Territory visits, he called them, covering accounts across the Tri-County area. Sometimes he'd be gone Friday to Sunday. Sometimes he'd leave Thursday and come back Monday morning looking tired and smelling like a different soap. Nobody blinked. Nobody is that good. I do numbers for a living. I know when something doesn't add up. But I push the thought down the way I push down everything else because of questioning Mike meant questioning Nia. And questioning Nia meant another Sunday call about choices. Let me paint you a picture of Nia's life. 3-bedroom colonial on Birch Lane. A nursery she'd been decorating since month 4. Sage green walls, a $900 crib, monogrammed onesies lined up in the closet like little soldiers. Instagram photos every week. Mike's hand on her belly. Mike assembling the changing table. Mike holding a pair of tiny shoes to the camera with a caption that said, counting down 38,000 hearts. I scrolled past them at midnight while reviewing a client's expense discrepancies. I'm not going to pretend I didn't feel it. The sharp little bite of watching your younger sister build the life people assumed you'd failed at. I felt it. I also noticed things. The way Mike's territory kept expanding. The weekends that stretched longer. He'd leave on a Friday saying he had accounts in the eastern counties and come back Sunday night smelling like a soap that wasn't in their bathroom. Nia never questioned it. Mom called it work ethic. I called it a pattern because patterns are what I see when I look at anything long enough. There was the time Devin came home from school and said Uncle Mike had promised to take him to a baseball game but never showed. He forgot. Mom, it's fine. Devin was 8. He was already learning to forgive men who disappear, and I hated that more than anything my mother ever said to me. There was also the Wednesday Mike didn't come to Devin's school play. He'd promised Devin had saved him a seat. The seat stayed empty for 45 minutes before Devin stopped looking at the door. When Mike called the next day with an excuse about a flat tire in Reedsville, Devin said, "It's okay," in a voice so practiced it broke something in my chest. If a relative ever made you feel small at a family party while hiding their own mess, you already know how this ends, but trust me, you don't know how. Tell me in the comments who was your perfect relative. Subscribe so the algorithm actually shows you the ending. 5 weeks before the shower, Mike called me. Not Nia, not Mom, me. He needed a favor. And that favor is where this whole thing cracked open. The favor was Devin. Nia had a prenatal appointment and Mom was going with her, and Mike offered to pick Devin up from school and take him out for the afternoon so I could meet a client deadline. I almost said no. Something twitched in my gut the way a number twitches on a spreadsheet before you find the error. But Devin's face lit up. Uncle Mike said we'd get milkshakes, Mom, and I said yes. They were gone 4 hours. When Mike's truck pulled into my driveway at 6, Devin hopped out happy and stick-a-faced, clutching a small paper bag. Uncle Mike got me a toy. I thanked Mike, waved, watched him back out. Then I looked in the bag, a race car, red, small, the kind you'd buy for a 3-year-old, not an 8-year-old. The packaging said ages 2 to 4. I turned it over. Huh, Devin shrugged. He grabbed 2 from the store, 1 for me and 1 for he stopped. 1 for who, Dev? He bit his lip. I wasn't supposed to say. I let it go. I shouldn't have, but I let it go. Later that night, I was moving laundry from Mike's truck seat to the house. He'd left Devin's jacket and a crumpled receipt fell out of the pocket. A gas station, fuel, plus a bag of animal crackers and a juice box. The station was in Marbleton. Marbleton was 40 minutes east, past the county line, nowhere near Mike's sales territory. And nowhere near anywhere Devin would need a milkshake. I smoothed the receipt on my kitchen counter and stared at it the way I stare at a column that won't reconcile. Devin didn't have a little brother, so whose race car was that? I started knitting the blanket 3 weeks before the shower. Pale yellow yarn, soft enough to press against a newborn's cheek. I'd learned to knit from a YouTube video when Devin was a baby. Couldn't afford store-bought anything back then, so I made him a hat that looked like a lopsided mushroom, and he wore it anyway. This blanket was better. Tighter stitches, cleaner edges. I worked on it after Devin went to bed, sitting cross-legged on the couch with the TV muted, pulling yarn through loops until my fingers ocked. Each row was a sentence I couldn't say out loud. I love my sister. I want her baby to be warm. I want to show up to that shower and have someone look at what I made and see me. Not the single mom, not the rough draft, not the bad choice, just me. The giftable at Nia's shower would be stacked with $200 strollers and cashmere sleep sacks from registries I couldn't afford. I knew that my blanket would sit there like a potluck dish at a catered dinner, but I kept knitting because the alternative was showing up empty-handed and giving Mom one more thing to measure me against. I finished the last knot at midnight on a Tuesday, held it up under the kitchen light. It was uneven in 2 spots and the fringe was slightly longer on the left side. Devin wandered in half asleep and squinted at it. It's really yellow, Mom. It's pale yellow. It's really pale yellow. I folded it into tissue paper and told myself a blanket could change how they saw me. It couldn't, but something else would. The week before the shower, Mom called with instructions, not a conversation, a briefing. Arrive at 8. Set up the folding chairs in the backyard. Arrange the balloon arch. Don't touch the cake. Don't rearrange the gift table. Don't bring up your situation because this is Nia's day. My situation, I repeated. You know what I mean, Ingrid. The divorce, being on your own. It makes Nia uncomfortable and she shouldn't be stressed right now. I stood at my kitchen sink and watched a robin land on the fence outside. I counted to 5 in my head. I wasn't planning to bring it up, Mom. Good and dress nicely, not work. I owned exactly 2 nice dresses, both from a clearance rack at Nordstrom 4 years ago. I picked the navy one because it had pockets, and I liked having somewhere to put my hands when I didn't know what to do with them. Dion asked if he could wear his dinosaur tie. I said yes because I had stopped saying no to things that made my kids smile. The night before the shower, I laid the blanket on my bed, the tissue paper open like wings. I pressed my palm flat against the yarn, 3 weeks of late nights. I thought about my mother's voice on the phone. Don't bring up your situation. And I thought about the receipt from Marbleton and the toy car for a child who didn't exist in any version of Mike's life that my family knew about. Devin came into the bedroom and sat next to the blanket. He ran his fingers across the stitching. You put a lot of work into this, Mom. I did. Aunt Nia's going to love it. His voice had that particular hope that children carry. The unearned certainty that effort equals appreciation, that a gift given with love will be received with love. I didn't correct him. I tucked the blanket into a gift bag and set it by the front door. In the morning, Devin was up before me, already dressed. Dinosaur tie knotted in a way that would make any Boy Scout W cease. He'd combed his own hair. A cowlick stood straight up in the back like a flag. I want to look nice, Mom. It's a party. I smoothed the cowlick with a wet palm and told him he looked perfect. He beamed. My son was excited to go to a party where nobody would save him a good chair. That's the thing about kids. They keep showing up for people who don't show up for them. I could have said something right then about the Marbleton receipt, about the numbers, about any of it. I could have called Nia and opened the door, but I told myself it was probably nothing because the alternative was everything and I wasn't ready for everything. Not yet. 4 days before the shower, Mike texted me. Hey, Ingrid, quick favor. Trying to refinance the house and the bank wants organized statements. You're the numbers person. Could you glance at these for me? He sent 3 PDFs, bank statements, 3 months of transactions for a joint checking account. I should have said no. I should have told him to hire his own accountant. But Mike had never once asked me for anything. And some part of me, the part that still wanted to belong to this family, thought maybe this was him finally seeing me as useful. So I opened the files at 11 at night with a mug of cold coffee and Devin's math homework still spread across the table. The statements were messy. Typical household spending groceries, gas, a Costco membership, Nia's prenatal copays. Then I saw it. A recurring autopay, $1,450 per month to a property management company in Marbleton. Marbleton, the same town on that gas receipt. I scrolled. There was another charge, $620 per month to something called Bright Horizons Children's Center, also in Marbleton, a daycare. Nia and Mike didn't have a child yet. Their baby wasn't due for 2 more months. I sat with those numbers for a long time. The coffee went from cold to room temperature to something I forgot was there. A rental property in Marbleton could be an investment. The daycare could be for a relative's kid, a favor, a tax write-off I wasn't seeing. There were explanations. There are always explanations when you're looking at numbers you don't want to understand. I closed the laptop. I didn't sleep. The numbers didn't add up, and I was the only person in my family trained to notice. I spent the next 2 days telling myself to stay out of it. That's what I do. I carry the weight. I organize the columns. I don't rock the table. Over-responsibility is a professional skill when you're a forensic accountant. It's a trap when you're a sister. I ran the numbers again. The Marbleton rent had been active for 37 months. The daycare payments for 31. Both started before Nia and Mike's wedding. I cross-referenced the payment dates with Mike's territory visits. Every month, like clockwork, Mike made a deposit into a separate savings account the day before the rent-a-ta drafted. He was funding a second household on a schedule more reliable than his mortgage. My hands were shaking, and I was angry at them for shaking because I'm a woman who reads fraud reports for a living. I've untangled embezzlement schemes, caught expense padding, flagged phantom vendors. Numbers don't scare me. But these numbers had my sister's name on them, and my nephew or niece growing inside her, and a holiday table I still sat at every December even though nobody saved me a good chair. So I did what I always do. I told myself it wasn't my problem. I told myself there was probably an explanation. I told myself I'd ask Mike casually at the right moment after the shower when things were calm. I filed the statements in a folder on my desktop labeled Mike Refinance, and I closed it. I picked up Devin's math homework and checked his long division. He'd gotten every answer right. "You're good at this, Dev." He grinned. "I learned from you." The next morning, sitting in my office above the dry cleaner, I opened a case file for a client, a small business owner whose partner had been siphoning cash into a personal LLC for 3 years. The partner coached Little League, organized the company picnic, brought donuts every Friday. Everyone loved him. The books told a different story. I stared at the spreadsheet and thought about Mike's donuts, the steaks he grilled, the flowers he brought Mom. The way he kissed Nia's temple in every photo like a man performing marriage for an audience. Charm is a column that doesn't reconcile. I've seen it 100 times in fraud work. The people who steal the most are never the ones who look like they'd steal. They're the ones who bring donuts. I closed the client file and opened the folder labeled Mike Refinance. I stared at the Marbleton autopay for 60 seconds, then closed it again. I'm trained to follow money. I just didn't want to follow it here. 3 days before the shower, Mike picked Devin up again. I almost said no. I'd been saying no to the guy's days since the receipt, making excuses about homework and bedtimes. But Devin begged, and Mike showed up 10 minutes early with that easy grin and a basketball under his arm. And I caved. They were gone 3 hours. When Devin came home, he was quieter than usual. He sat on his bed and pulled off his sneakers one at a time, slow like he was thinking hard about something. I leaned in his doorway. "Good day." "Yeah." He picked at his shoelace. "Mom, can I tell you something? Always." Uncle Mike took me to a house. Not his house, a different one. There was a lady with red hair and a little boy. The boy's name is Cody. He's really small, like maybe 3. My spine went cold, not my hands this time. My spine straight up the center like someone had laid an ice cube at the base and let it melt upward. "Who is the Lady Dove?" Uncle Mike called her Sarah. "She made us sandwiches." Cody showed me his toy trucks. He's got a lot of trucks. Devin looked up at me and his eyes were wide and careful. Uncle Mike said it's a surprise. He said, "Don't tell anyone, especially Aunt Nia." He said, "It's like a birthday present. You don't talk about it before the day." An 8-year-old can hold a surprise. He can keep a birthday gift secret for weeks. But a secret is different. A surprise ends in a smile. A secret ends in a room that goes silent. I sat on the edge of his bed and put my arm around him and said the only thing I could think of. "Thank you for telling me, Dev. You didn't do anything wrong." The next morning, I found the drawing. I wasn't looking for it. I was emptying Devon's backpack to wash it. He'd spilled juice inside. And between a crumpled permission slip and a half-eaten granola bar, there was a folded piece of construction paper. 2 houses. The one on the left had a triangle roof and green grass and a stick figure labeled Antna with a round belly. The one on the right was smaller, drawn in orange crayon with 3 figures in front. A tall man labeled Daddy Mike, a woman with red scribbles for hair labeled Aunt Sarah, and a tiny boy labeled Cody. Between the 2 houses, Devon had drawn a road with a little car on it. The car had a smile. I sat down on the kitchen floor with the paper in my hands. My son had drawn the truth, and he didn't even know it was the truth. He thought it was a picture of people he'd met on a fun day. I turned the paper over. On the back in Devon's careful block letters was an address. Not a full address, just a street name and a number. The way a kid copies what he sees on a mailbox. 412 Elm, Marbleton. He'd misspelled it. Marbleton, 40 minutes east. Same town as the gas receipt. Same town as the $1,450 rent. Same town as the daycare. I folded the drawing and put it in the pocket of my cardigan. Then I picked up my phone and canceled every remaining guy's day with Mike. I told him Devon had too much homework. I told him I needed Devon home after school. I didn't explain. I didn't owe Mike an explanation. I owed my son a mother who stopped letting him walk into Somion Elsa's lie. That night, after Devon fell asleep, I opened my laptop. I told myself I was just checking, just confirming. I pulled up the county assessor's public records for Marbleton Free Legal, the same database I use for asset searches in my work. I typed in 412 Elm. The property came back as a 2-bedroom rental unit leased to a Michael and Sarah Dunning since April 3 years ago. Michael, not Mike from sales. Michael Dunning. The same middle and last combination on the bank statement side reviewed. The lease was co-signed. Utilities in both names. Devon had already told me the rest. A woman named Sarah with red hair and a boy named Cody, age 3, who showed him his trucks. The lease gave me the adults. My son gave me the child. Between the 2, I didn't need a database. I sat in my dark kitchen and did the math I didn't want to do. Cody was 3. Nia and Mike got married 3.5 years ago, which meant Mike had fathered a child with another woman either just before or just after his wedding. He'd been paying rent on a second home, paying for a second child's daycare, living a second life in a town 40 minutes from the one where my sister was painting a nursery sage green and posting Instagram photos of tiny shoes. I closed the laptop. I pulled Devon's drawing from my cardigan pocket and looked at it again under the stove light. 2 houses, 1 smiling car driving between them. My 8-year-old had mapped it all out in crayon, and no one in my family could read it but me. It didn't cry. I wanted to. Instead, I made a list. That's what accountants do when the numbers tell a story no one wants to hear. We make a list and we figure out who needs to know. Here's what I didn't do. I didn't screenshot the records and text them to Nia at midnight. I didn't call my mother and announce it over speakerphone. I didn't post it online or whisper it to a cousin or save it for maximum damage at a public event. I'm a forensic accountant. I know exactly what a well-timed reveal can do to someone's finances, their custody arrangement, their entire life. And I knew that dropping this bomb at Nia's baby shower in front of 30 people with her 7 months pregnant would be cruel, not justice. Cruelty. So I made a plan. I would wait until after the shower. I'd ask Nia to meet me for coffee. Just us. No mom, no Mike. I'd bring the bank statements, the public records, Devon's drawing. I'd sit across from her and tell her gently, clearly, the way you deliver hard news to someone you love. Even when they've spent years making sure you knew they didn't love you back, she deserved to hear it from someone who cared about her baby's future. Not from a stranger, not from a courtroom, not from Cody's mother showing up at her front door one day. I'd also tell her I could help. Forensic accounting exists for exactly this kind of situation. Hidden assets, undisclosed dependents, marital misconduct that affects property division. I could trace every dollar Mike had funneled to Marbleton and make sure Nia and that baby were protected. I rehearsed it twice in my head while washing dishes. I wrote notes on a legal pad. What to say first, how to pace it, where to put the bank statements so she could see them without being overwhelmed. Then I tore the notes up and flushed them because writing a script for ruining your sister's marriage felt clinical in a way that made my stomach turn. This wasn't an audit. This was Nia, the girl who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms. The teenager who borrowed my mascara before dances and never gave it back. The woman who'd spent 10 years comparing herself to me and finding the one metric where she came out ahead. I wasn't going to take that metric from her in a room full of people. I was going to sit across from her with coffee and tell her the truth and then hold her hand while she cried because that's what big sisters do. Even when the little sister has spent a decade pretending she doesn't need one. That was the plan, quiet, private, principled. It was a good plan. Truth is a scalpel, not a hammer. You use it where it heals, not where it crowds. I had 72 hours to execute. Plants don't survive an 8-year-old, but I didn't know that yet. 2 days before the shower, I texted Mike. I kept it short. We need to talk about Marbleton. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then I don't know what you think you know, Ingrid. I typed back, I know about the lease, I know about the daycare, I know about Cody. This time, the dots didn't dance. He called me. His voice was low and tight. The way a man sounds when he's choosing between anger and negotiation. You went through my statements. You asked me to look at them, Mike. Silence. 5 seconds. 10. Then he picked the door he was always going to pick. Stay out of my marriage, Ingrid. This is none of your business. People already know what you are. Bitter, jealous, alone. If you say one word to Nia, I'll make sure the whole family believes it's revenge. I held the phone against my ear and looked at Devon's drawing still pinned to my refrigerator with a dinosaur magnet. I'm not telling anyone at the shower. I'm asking you to tell Nia yourself before the baby. That's not going to happen. Then I'll tell her after privately. She deserves to know. She deserves a husband who's there, and that's what I am. He hung up. Right here is where I had to choose. Blow it all up or protect the people who hurt me. I chose the quiet way. You might have chosen different, tell me below. And if you're rooting for that blanket to mean something, hit like so I know you're still with me. Mike had 2 days to come clean. He spent them smiling for baby shower photos. He posted one that night, Nia kissing his cheek. Caption, almost time. 32,000 hearts. I went to bed with my phone face down. Saturday 8:00 a.m. Mom's backyard looked like a page from a magazine I couldn't afford to subscribe to. A balloon arch in blush and gold framed the patio door. White folding chairs lined up in perfect rows, each one tied with a ribbon that probably cost more than my lunch budget. A 3-tier cake sat on a pedestal table, fondant roses, baby Dunning in cursive. There was a mimosa bar, a photo booth with props, a clothes line of tiny onesies pinned with wooden clips. Devon and I pulled into the driveway at 7:58. I wore the navy dress with pockets. Devon wore his dinosaur tie. He carried the blanket wrapped in tissue tucked under his arm like a treasure. I carried nothing but me car keys and every ounce of composure I'd been building for 34 years. Mom met us at the side gate. She didn't say hello. She pointed at the stack of chairs against the garage wall. Those need to go in the backyard, 5 rows of 6, and make sure the ribbons face front. Good morning, Mom. She looked at Devon. He can sit in the hallway. There's a folding chair by the coat rack. My son, her grandson, assigned to a hallway chair like an afterthought. I knelt in front of Devon and straightened his tie. You're going to sit with me, I said, quiet enough that Mom didn't hear. He nodded. We set up 30 chairs in the June heat while caterers carried silver trays past us without making eye contact. Nia arrived at 9:30 in a white sundress, glowing, one hand on her belly, Mike beside her with his arm around her waist. He saw me across the yard, his jaw tightened for half a second. Then the grin came back. Practiced. Perfect. 30 guests would arrive in an hour. None of them knew what I knew. The gift table was a monument. Stacked boxes from registries, a bugaboo stroller still in plastic, a cashmere sleep sack, a white noise machine that cost more than my first car payment, bags with curled ribbons, envelopes with checks, a crystal picture frame engraved, baby's first year. I set my gift at the end of the row. It looked exactly how I knew it would look. Small, soft, wrapped in tissue paper that was slightly wrinkled from Devin carrying it under his arm. Nia worked the crowd for an hour. Hugs, photos, laughter. She moved through the party like she was hosting a gala, which in a way she was. When she finally made it to the gift table, she opened the big ones first. Each box got a squeal, a held-up display, a round of applause. Then she reached mine. She pulled the tissue paper back and held up the pale yellow blanket between two fingers like she was checking a piece of fabric at a clearance sale. Oh, she tilted her head. Homemade. That's so you, Ingrid. She set it on the chair behind her, not on the display table with the other gifts, not in her lap. On the chair behind her, like a napkin she'd deal with later. Two women next to me exchanged a glance. One pressed her lips together. I felt Devin's hand find mine under the table and squeeze. The blanket I'd spent 3 weeks making. Every midnight stitch, every row of yellow yarn sat crumpled on a folding chair while Nia held up a $200 swaddle set and the room erupted. She set my hours of work aside like a napkin. I let her for now. I squeezed Devin's hand back and kept my face the way I'd trained it to be. Still, even the digs started during the mimosa round. Nia's friend Kelsey, the one with the blowout and the loud voice, leaned across the table and smiled at me with all her teeth. So Ingrid still single. Anyone on the horizon? Before I could answer, Mom cut in from the kitchen doorway. Ingrid's focusing on Devin. That's enough for her. She said it like she was defending me. It didn't feel like defense. Another woman, Mike's cousin, I think, tilted her champagne glass toward Nia and Mike. You two are just the cutest. Nia, you really found a good one. Nia beamed. Mike put his hand on her back. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He didn't check it, but I saw his hand drift toward it and stop. Some of us just attract the right kind of man. Ingrid, it's not luck. That was Mom's friend, Diane. She patted my arm when she said it, like she was consoling me at a funeral I was attending for my own life. Devin sat beside me in a chair that was too tall for him, his feet dangling 6 in off the grass. He'd been quiet the whole time, watching the adults with that careful cataloging look he gets when he's processing something. A woman I didn't know cooed at Nia's belly and said, "Your baby is going to have the best life. 2 parents, a beautiful home, everything." She looked at me when she said everything like I was the counter-example. Devin tugged my sleeve. "Mom, can we go soon?" "Not yet, honey. They keep talking about us." He was 8. He could hear it all. And I was sitting in a backyard full of people who used my life as a cautionary tale between sips of mimosa. At 2:00, Mom stood up with a glass of champagne and clink-kegged it with a fork. The yard went quiet. 30 faces turned toward her. She was wearing the blouse she saves for church. Cream pearl buttons and her hair was set like she'd been to the salon that morning. She had "I want to make a toast," she said, voice carrying across the lawn the way it always does when she has an audience. To my beautiful daughter Nia and to Mike, who gave her everything a mother could hope for. A real home, a real partnership, a complete family. She paused on complete and let it sit. I felt the word land on me like a hand pressing my shoulder down. Complete as opposed to what? Incomplete. Broken me, Nia, sweetheart. You did it the right way. You built something strong, something lasting, and now you're bringing a baby into a family that's whole. She lifted her glass. To the Dunnings. To the Dunnings. 30 voices echoed. Glasses clink-kegged. People drank. Nia touched her eyes with her fingertips. Mike kissed her temple. His lips pressed there exactly 3 seconds. I counted because I count things because that's what I do when I can't control anything else. 3 seconds of performance. After the toast, Mom made rounds accepting compliments on the party like she was collecting tithes. "Such a beautiful family," someone said. "You raised her right, Carol." Mom beamed. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at Devin. We were 3 FT away sitting in the same row of chairs, and we might as well have been in the parking lot. Kelsey organized a game, guessed the baby's birthday, and handed out pink cards. While everyone wrote dates and giggled, Mike's phone buzzed again. He pulled it out, read something, typed something back. Quick thumbs. I watched his face shift for half a second, a tightening around the eyes, the mouth pressing flat, before he pocketed it and put his arm back around Nia. Nobody else noticed. Devin noticed. He leaned over and whispered, "Uncle Mike looks worried, Mom. SHH, baby." But he does. Devin looked at me with those dark eyes that see everything. Every word that's really aimed at us, every toast that's really a measurement, every complete. That means unlike your mother. I raised my glass with everyone else because I am the kind of woman who raises her glass even when the toast is designed to remind her she's less. I sipped. The champagne was expensive. I taste nothing. Somewhere in my cardigan pocket, folded next to my car keys, was a drawing of 2 houses and a car with a smile. And the word complete was about to become the shortest joke in the room. It happened during the advice round. Someone had set up a card station where guests wrote parenting tips on pink index cards. Kelsey read one aloud, "Sleep when the baby sleeps," and the yard laughed. Then she picked up another card and said, "Nia, what's the one thing you're most excited about?" "Being a mom." Nia grinned. She rubbed her belly. She looked at me, not at the crowd, not at Kelsey, at me, and I watched the line form on her lips before she said it. "Honestly, I'm just grateful my baby is going to have a complete home. 2 parents, a father who shows up every single day." She paused. The yard was quiet. Then she tilted her head, still looking at me, and her grin sharpened. "At least my baby will have a father." The laugh that rolled through the yard was instant. Not all 30 people, but enough 15, maybe 20. Some covered their mouths. Some didn't bother. 2 of Nia's friends actually clapped. Clapped, palms hitting palms. The same sound you make when a comedian lands a punchline. Except the punchline was 6 years of my life, and the comedian was my sister, and the stage was a backyard where I'd set up the chairs that morning. Mike stared at the grass. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other the way a man does when he wants to be anywhere else. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. Mom pressed her lips together and didn't say a word to stop it. She sat in her cushioned chair, the good chair, the one with the armrests, and she let the laughter happen the way a judge lets a verdict stand. Devin's hand found mine again under the table. His grip was so tight, his knuckles turned white. I could feel the bones of his fingers pressing into my palm. 8 years old, and he was holding me together. I sat there and let the sound roll over me, the laughter, the clapping, the whispers, and I held my face still. Not because I wasn't hurt. I was hurt in the place where you keep the things you've never said to anyone. The deep drawer you don't open because if you open it in public, you'll never close it again. The clapping is what I remember, not the words. The clapping. 20 adults applauding my sister for using my worst year as her best joke. And my son's hand and mine, holding on like he was afraid the sound would carry me away. Mom waited for the laughter to thin. Then she leaned forward in her chair, the good chair, the cushioned one, the one nobody else was allowed to sit in, and she said it. Not loud. She didn't need to be loud. Mom's voice carries when it's quiet the same way a knife cuts deeper when it's slow. Some women just make bad choices. She wasn't looking at Nia. She was looking at me. 6 words delivered the way she delivers everything. Like a fact, like weather, like something you can't argue with because it's already true. A few women nodded. Diane murmured, "That's right." The yard settled into a satisfied hum. The way a room feels when everyone agrees and no one's uncomfortable except the person they're agreeing about. Devin pulled my sleeve. "Mom," his voice was small and shaky. "Mom, can I sit down and be quiet, sweetheart?" That was Mom, not to me. To Devin, my son tugging my arm, trying to say something, and my mother shut him down from 4 FT away without looking at him, like he was background noise, like he was part of my bad chase. I felt Devin's body stiffen next to me. I felt his fingers release my sleeve. And I felt something in me shift, not snap, not break, shift like a foundation settling. I put my hand on Devin's knee under the table. I breathed in through my nose and out through my mouth. I was not going to fight. I was not going to cry. I was going to stand up, collect my son, and walk out of this yard with my head level and my car keys in my pocket. I was going to leave. Then my son stood up. He didn't shout. He didn't cry. He stood up from his folding chair the way a kid stands up when the teacher calls his name. Straight-backed, serious, his dinosaur tie slightly crooked. The yard had been laughing 10 seconds ago. Now it was just murmuring, settling, people reaching for their champagne and their phones. Devon's voice cut through all of it. Clear, steady. The voice of a child who had been told to be quiet and had decided in the way that only 8-year-olds decide things that the adults were wrong. Aunt Nia, should I tell everyone about Uncle Mike's other family? The sound didn't stop. It evaporated. 1 second there were 30 people breathing and clinking and shifting in their chairs. The next second there was nothing. I've been in conference rooms when a fraud finding is read aloud. I've watched CEOs go pale. I've seen silence that costs people their careers. I have never heard a silence like the one my son made in that backyard. Nia's smile didn't fall. It froze like someone had paused a video-on frame before the picture breaks apart. Mike was standing by the mimosa bar. His hand was around a glass. The glass didn't move. Nothing moved. Devon looked around the yard the way he looks around a classroom when he's answered a question and isn't sure if he got it right. Uncle Mike has another house. He said quieter now, talking to Nia, but loud enough for the front row to hear, with Aunt Sarah and a boy named Cody. He's 3. He showed me his trucks. 30 people, 30 faces. Every single one turning not toward Devon, not toward Nia, toward Mike. Mike, whose hand was still on the glass. Mike, whose face had gone the color of the fondant on the cake. Mike, who had 2 days to tell the truth and spent them posting photos with 32,000 hearts. Nia laughed. It was the worst laugh I've ever heard. High, thin, cracking at the edges like plaster before it falls. What is he talking about? She looked at me, not at Mike. Ingrid, what did you tell him? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Mike answered for all of us by moving. He set the glass down too hard. Champagne sloshed over the rim. He took a step toward Devon and then stopped because 30 people were watching, and a man who steps toward a child in front of witnesses knows how that looks. He's confused, Mike said. His voice was too loud. Kids make things up. He's 8. He heard something on TV and I didn't hear it on TV. Devon's voice was calm, calmer than Mike's. Calmer's. I went to the house. You took me there. Aunt Sarah made sandwiches. Mike's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Kelsey put her champagne down. Diane set her fork on the table. Mom hadn't moved from her chair. She was gripping the armrests with both hands. And for the first time in my life, I saw something on my mother's face I didn't recognize. It might have been fear. I stayed in my seat. I kept my hand on Devon's knee. I did not speak. This is what voice restraint sounds like. The loudest person in the room is the one who says nothing while the truth does the work. Mike tried again. Ingrid, you put him up to this. She didn't. Devon looked at his uncle the way children look at adults when the math finally doesn't add up. I drew a picture. It's in my backpack. 20 heads turned toward the hallway, toward the coat rack, toward the folding chair where they had sent my son to be out of the way, and the small blue backpack hanging on its arm. Innocent men don't stand up that fast. Mike was already moving toward the door. Nia got to the backpack first. She was 7 months pregnant, and she crossed that yard faster than anyone else. One hand under her belly, the other reaching for the zipper. Mom called her name. Nia didn't stop. She pulled the backpack off the chair, unzipped it, and the folded construction paper fell out between a juice box and a permission slip. She opened it. 2 houses, 1 smiling car. Daddy Mike, Aunt Sarah, Cody. Nia stared at the paper. I watched her eyes move from one crayon figure to the next, and I watched the drawing do what I'd never wanted it to do. Not here, not like this. It dismantled her piece by piece. The triangle roofs, the green grass, the little boy with truck-shaped scribbles in his hands. A 3-year-old named after nobody in our family living in a town she'd never heard of on money that came from the account she thought was paying their mortgage. Mike. Her voice was low, controlled, almost professional, like she was reading a diagnosis. What is this? Mike was at the patio door. He had his car keys in his hand. He'd pulled them from his pocket the way guilty men reached for exits. Fast, automatic, without thinking about what it looks like. Nia, I can explain. Then explain. She held the drawing up. Her hand was shaking. The paper trembled and the crayon houses shivered. Explain the drawing, Mike. Explain, Cody. explain 37 months of rent I didn't know about. She'd done the math. Maybe not the exact number. That was mine. But she'd heard Devin say 3 years, and she'd counted backward past her own wedding. Mike looked at the drawing in her hand. He looked at the 30 faces staring at him from white folding chairs. He looked at the patio door behind him. He chose the door. He walked through it, grabbed his jacket off the hook, and left. The front door shut so quietly it was almost polite. His truck started 30 seconds later. Nobody followed him. Nia turned on me. I expected it. Grief needs a target, and Mike had just removed himself. So the next available body was mine. You did this. Her voice was shaking now. All the control gone. You knew. And you brought your son here to humiliate me in front of everyone. You've always been jealous of me, Ingrid, always. And now you use your own kid to I asked Mike to tell you himself. I said it quietly. Not cold, not smug the way you say a number that settles an audit. 2 days ago, I found the records doing the refinance work he asked me to do. I told him to come clean before the baby. He refused. The yard was so quiet. I could hear a neighbor's sprinkler clicking 3 houses over. I wasn't going to say anything today. I had a plan to tell you privately after the shower gently. Nia's mouth trembled, so why didn't you? Because my son heard what you said to me and he's 8 and he thinks in straight lines and he connected. At least my baby will have a father with the fact that Uncle Mike already has another family. He wasn't trying to hurt you, Nia. He thought he was helping. Kelsey stood up. Diane looked at the grass. 2 women in the back row quietly collected their purses. Nia pressed both hands against her belly and stared at me like I was the one who had betrayed her. And maybe in her arithmetic I was. I didn't argue. I didn't list the receipts and the lease and the daycare invoices. I didn't say what I could have said. That the woman calling me a bad choice was standing in the wreckage of a marriage she'd used as a trophy. And the only person in this yard who'd tried to handle it with dignity was the one she'd been laughing at 20 minutes ago. I came here with a blanket, Nia, not a bomb. He built the bomb. I just stopped lying about it. Nia sank into a folding chair. Her hands were still on her belly and her eyes were open but unfocused, staring at the balloon arch like it was a door she could walk through and come out on the other side of an hour ago. For 1 second, just one. I saw my sister. Not the woman who'd mocked me, not the woman who used my divorce as a party joke. My little sister, 29, pregnant, sitting in a backyard full of witnesses to the worst moment of her life, realizing she was about to become the thing she'd laughed at, a single mother. The moment passed. She didn't apologize. She didn't look at Devin. She pressed her face into her hands and made a sound that was somewhere between crying and choking. And it was real and it was human. And it didn't undo a single thing she'd said. Mom stood up from her chair. She looked at Nia, then at me, then at the empty space where Mike had been standing. Her mouth opened and closed twice. The woman who always had a verdict, who'd spent 30 years handing down sentences about choices and arithmetic, and which daughter got it right, had nothing. I didn't wait for her to find it. I walked to the chair behind the gift table and picked up the pale yellow blanket. I folded it carefully, the way I'd folded it the night I finished the last knot. Then I turned to my mother. Mom, you can call me when you're ready to have a conversation that doesn't start with what I did wrong. Until then, Devin and I are going home. She didn't respond. I took Devin's hand. His dinosaur tie had come loose, and one end was tucked into his shirt. I fixed it as we walked through the side gate, past the balloon arch, past the 3-tier cake that said, Baby Dunning in cursive. Devin looked up at me as we reached the car. Are you mad at me, Mom? No, baby, you told the truth. That's never bad. I buckled him in. I drove us home. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. Mike disappeared for 6 days, not dramatically, not a missing persons report or a manhunt. He just stopped answering his phone, stopped showing up at the Birch Lane house, stopped existing in the version of life Nia had built around him. On day 3, a woman named Sarah called Nia's cell. She'd found Nia's number in Mike's phone records. She was calm. She was exhausted. She had a 3-year-old who kept asking where Daddy went. They talked for 47 minutes. I know this because Nia called me afterward, and her voice was flat in the way voices go flat when all the shock has been used up. And what's left is just math. He took $23,000 from our joint savings over the last year. She said, I didn't notice. How did I not notice? He routed it through a secondary checking account. I told her small transfers, irregular timing, it's textbook. Nia was quiet for a long time. Can you help me? 3 words. I'd waited 6 years to hear from my sister, not for the satisfaction, but for the proof that existed in her life as something other than a cautionary tale. Yes, that's what I do. I spent the next 2 weeks pulling apart Mike's financial records, hidden assets in a business account, unreported income from a side contracting gig, 37 months of rent and daycare that affected the marital estate. I built the file the way I build every file, methodical, documented, admissible. Nia hired a family lawyer. The lawyer looked at my file and called it the most organized set of financial discovery documents ever received from a non-attorney. Mom called once. She didn't say she was sorry. She said I didn't know about Mike. I told her the same thing I'd told her at the shower. You can call me when you're ready to have a conversation that doesn't start with what I did wrong. She hasn't called back yet. I sent the blanket to Nia by mail. No, not just the yellow yarn in a clean box. The baby would need it. The baby was innocent. Some women do make bad choices. I'm just not the one in this room. That night after I mailed the blanket, Devin and I sat on the kitchen floor and ate ramen from mismatched bowls. The apartment was quiet. No champagne, no balloon arches, no toasts about complete families. Devin had a noodle hanging from his chin and he slurped it in with a sound that made us both laugh. Mom. Yeah, Dev, Aunt Nia said, your baby, meaning me, doesn't have a father. Is that bad? I put my bowl down. I pulled him into my side. Noodle chin and all. You have me, I have you. We're not missing anything, Dev. He thought about it. The way he thinks about everything. Slowly, carefully turning it over like a rock he found in the yard. What about Uncle Mike's other kid, Cody? Cody has people who love him too, even though the grown-ups messed it up. Even though the grown-ups messed it up. Mom, at the party when everybody laughed at you. I didn't think it was funny. I know, baby. That's why I said it. Not to be mean. Aunt Nia kept saying stuff about dads. And I kept thinking, but Uncle Mike already has a whole other family, so why is everybody laughing? His logic was clean. Cleaner than any courtroom argument, any financial audit, any carefully rehearsed speech I would have given over coffee. He saw a contradiction and he said it out loud. That's all. That's everything. He leaned into me and we sat there on the linoleum with the overhead light buzzing and the fridge humming and the leftover smell of instant broth between us. 2 people, 1 kitchen floor, no audience, no ribbons, no arithmetic about what counts as complete. A family isn't whole because 2 parents stand in the photo. It's whole when no one in it has to lie to be loved. Devin taught a room full of grown-ups that in 1 sentence, and I've never been prouder to be the woman they called a bad choice. That's my story. A handmade blanket, a crayon drawing, and an 8-year-old braver than every adult in the room. If you've ever been the one your family judged while they hid the real mess behind matching outfits and Instagram posts, let this be your reminder. Quiet women see everything. If this reached you, share it with someone who needs it. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next.